Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Well, I've said this before, and here I am saying it again. Are you paying attention yet, leftoids? The sad reality is probably not, but yet again, another massive betrayal. It started with Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, his vote-buying scam that obviously backfired big time, not on the Biden administration, but on the suckers who thought that he was serious. And the next betrayal comes maybe a month later as Joe Biden, or should we say pro-union worker Joe Biden, backstabs union workers once again. All he needed to do was pledge his loyalty, his absolute unshakable support during the election season, vote for me, and then right after, he threw union workers under a bus. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on as backlash starts to mount. We've got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so let's first start off with the backstory, a little bit of context here. For those of you guys who are unaware, over the last few months there's been negotiations between the Biden team, the Biden White House, and unionized rail workers. Before the election, Joe Biden was taking victory laps back on September 16th, claiming they've come to a compromise, they've come to a deal, and the president himself, Joe Biden, should get credit for averting a nationwide railroad strike that would have been, quote, crippling to the economy.
President, you have just averted a nationwide railroad strike that would have been crippling to the economy. How did you do that? And what were those last hours like in the negotiations?
Well, look, we brought business and labor together. One of the things that happens in negotiations, particularly if they've been elongated like these have, is people say and do things where their pride gets engaged as well. And it's awful hard to back off of some of these things. So what we did was just say, look, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what's happening. You have a good deal being made for labor. Their income's going to go up 24% over the next 5 years. They've worked out the health care piece. They worked out days off. They both sat down, in my view, and they were in the office today saying, well, we finally figured out this is fair on both sides. And it took that time to focus. And the alternative was just not thinkable.
What do you mean?
If, in fact, they had gone on strike, the supply chains in this country would have come to a screeching halt. We would have seen a real economic crisis.
He took all the credit right before the election, and now all of a sudden it seems as though the deal is falling apart. And here's the thing, Joe Biden was taking credit right before the election, crisis averted. After the election, however, once things started to fall apart, once the deal started to fall apart, all of a sudden, Joe Biden insists that he was never directly involved in rail strike negotiations. Well, isn't that convenient? Once things were supposedly going well, he's on 60 Minutes trying to take credit for it right ahead of the election. Then on November 24th, once it was obvious that things were falling apart, I haven't been directly involved, no, it's been my team, probably hoping none of it falls on him. Well, the deal completely fell apart. And now the rail workers were planning a massive strike, which I believe was supposed to be scheduled for this week or possibly last week. And well, pro-union Joe takes action. Why, quote, Union Joe chose to make it illegal for rail workers to strike. Want to know how worried Washington was about a rail strike? Typically, reliable union champions Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi successfully rallied rank-and-file Democrats to side with railroad executives over their workers. You read that correctly. Biden decided the broader economy was a bigger priority than 100,000 freight rail workers having any paid sick leave in their next contract. After campaigning as the most pro-union presidential candidate in history, Biden signed into law a measure that makes a rail strike illegal. Listen, leftoids, Joe Biden is not pro-union. He's not pro-student. Joe Biden is only one thing, pro-Ukraine. What a slap in the face to his voters. Railroad workers fighting for paid sick leave is too much and too expensive, but sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, well, that's a-okay. How stupid is that? This coming from the guy who's constantly going on and on and on about how he's the most pro-union president of all time, essentially just told rail workers to go F themselves and made it illegal for them to strike. If they strike, they are now criminals. That is a crime. Unionized rail workers are responding.
Joe Biden said that he's the most pro-labor president ever. Well, this is the most anti-labor thing done since the destruction of Patco back in the 80s. I remember that well. You see Speaker Pelosi, the president, Leader Schumer talk about the fact that the supply chains are disrupted and they're going to be damaged. That's been happening for years now. And now they're worried about workers damaging supply chains. It makes no sense.
We have a pro-labor president who loves to, pat himself on the back for that. And when the going got tough, he turned his back on the people he's supposed to be looking out for. Joe Biden forced a contract on our unionized workers who voted against it.
And even worse for Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, this post the other day actually made it to the top of trending on Reddit. Well, F. From a railroad worker in Ohio this morning. Let's put it this way. For 3 years, I flew a flag in front of my house that said, impeach Trump. If Trump runs against Biden in 2024, I'll take some of my back pay and give it to Trump. I feel betrayed by Biden. Joe wants to make his legacy all of this incredible achievement that he's apparently achieved, but Joe's legacy is nothing but failure, fiscal irresponsibility, tyranny, disorder, turning on and enabling the military-industrial money laundering complex. And people are really starting to feel it, especially the betrayal part. Young voters, university students, came out in droves to vote in 2022 because Joe Biden promised them $10,000 in student loan forgiveness. That plan has essentially vaporized into thin air. Quite frankly, those students who were voting for a handout were scammed. And that's why for maybe the last 4 months or so since Joe Biden announced his plan, we've been calling it the student forgiveness scam. And now after claiming to be the most pro-union president in American history, who's always going to be on the side of union workers, Joe Biden gave union workers a big middle finger, sided with the railroad executives, and made it illegal for them to strike. I mean, people have to be feeling this stuff. And of course, we're just adding this to the 2020 betrayal. Joe Biden promising that he wasn't going to end fracking, he wasn't going to get in the way of fossil fuels, and of course that he was a friend to the union workers, then immediately gets into office. At least that's what he promised in the presidential debate, not the Democratic nomination debate. But then he gets elected, totally freezes permits for new oil exploration, decimates the industry, and destroys tens of thousands of good-paying union jobs, backstabs union workers as he cancels the Keystone XL. I mean, we're not just talking about little flip-flops here on small, insignificant issues. We're talking about Joe Biden's entire agenda, his entire ethos, his entire image as a presidential candidate being, I would argue, totally fraudulent. The guy is a fraud. He's a scammer. He's a con artist, a fake, a phony. He will say and do anything to get your vote and then publicly humiliate you, backstab you without a second thought. The type of guy that enters a supposed serious relationship, telling the woman she's the woman of his dreams, he plans on doing everything for her, he's gonna protect her forever, he's gonna marry her children, the whole 9 yards. But the entire time he was never serious about it and has been cheating on her since day one and never plans on proposing. That's essentially who Joe Biden is. That's who he is as a politician. People are paying attention, people are taking notice, and what it is at the end of the day is more ammunition heading into 2024. The next time Joe Biden claims that he's the most pro-union president of all time, you just gotta play this little part right over here.
Well, this is the most anti-labor thing done since the destruction of Patco back in the 80s. I remember that well.
The only issue is, are people paying attention? Are the low information, vote blue no matter who, loyal Democrat voters paying attention? You would think that they would be, especially as these betrayals continue to pile up. Well, the hope is that a small percentage are, but I have a feeling that unions themselves are certainly paying attention. Union Joe, the most pro-union president supposedly, just backstabbed union workers and sided with the executives. I'll ask the question again. Are you paying attention, lefties? Because you really should be. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you guys are up for it. I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.